Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a former boxer with ties to the mob versus a linguistic enthusiast called Mr Bonjour.
There's a saying in Polish that if either side puts a horse to run for president, people will support it anyway.
Poland goes to the polls. We unpack the candidates, their visions, and the region ahead of the country's presidential election. I'm Natasha Del Toro, and this is The Take. You know, one of the challenges for me so far has been pronunciation. So
I know.
maybe, Why don't we start out by, maybe you could help me. So it's Rafal Trzaskowski
Yes.
and Karol Nawrocki.
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 There you go. That's perfect. Yes.
Nawrocki.
Yes.
Okay. We could do this whole episode of me just trying to learn how to pronounce these names. That's a good one.
My name is Bartk Vanlarek. I'm editor-in-chief of ONet, which is a news website in Poland. I'm based in Warsaw. Before that, I was a foreign correspondent for a long time. I was a correspondent for one of the Polish newspapers to Moscow, then to Brussels, and then to Washington, D.C. And I spent 15 years outside Poland.
Ah, very cool. So you spent a little bit of time in D.C., so you know
Yes.
D.C. politics as well.
Yes.
Well, today we're going to talk about Polish politics, which, you know, as I've been reading about this election, there are some things that I found just a little strange, I have to say. Maybe we could even say shocking.
Yes.
I wonder if you could just start by telling us tell us three things that you found that were kind of the most shocking or say amusing about the candidates and this election that you've seen so far.
Well, so we're talking 2 days before the second round of the elections. And in the second round, we'll see a mayor of Warsaw against Nawrocki, the director of the Polish National Memory Institute. And Nawrocki has been accused by my website of being a pimp as a young guy, as a student. in
Actual
Gdańsk.
pimp,
Yes.
helping sex workers find.
Yes, he was working. Yes, he was working for security at a very well-known Polish hotel in Gdańsk, in northern Poland. And being a security guy, he was helping prostitutes to get to the rooms of the guests that ordered them. Well, basically that's it.
Wow. Okay. And this is confirmed. This is not just a rumor.
No, this is not a rumor. This is a confirmed story, although, of course, the candidate said it's not true. And he promised he would go to court against us. We'll see if it happens. There are more stories like this. He was a professional hooligan when he was young, a soccer hooligan. You know, all these stories about European soccer hooligans fighting each other before the games and after the games.
This use of hardcore fans as political muscle has been seen throughout Europe, from Ukraine to Poland, where ultranationalist hooligans have mobilized against progressive anti-government protesters.
So he was one of those, and he was fighting other hooligans.
Okay.
So he's a very interesting candidate. This is probably the most shocking thing for me in these elections. But it's not the only one. We had a candidate in the first round who openly supported Putin and Russia's attack against Ukraine. And in Poland, that was truly shocking. So, you know, we couldn't believe there's someone like this. And he came second to last in the elections. He didn't matter at all. Second to last.
Wow. Yes, of course, because Poland shares a border with Ukraine. So obviously everything that's happening.
And also with Russia. So we have a border with Russia as well. So everything that happens there, it's extremely important to us. And Poles are openly and vastly supporting Ukraine. So for us, it was shocking that there is a candidate for president who thinks he can run the pro-Russian platform.
So he's taking it pretty far. I mean, and that's even that's worse than the guy who was a pimp and who was a soccer hooligan.
Well, it depends who you ask, I think. But these are, both of them, I think, for at least, for a huge part of the voters, both of them shouldn't be running. But one of them can become the president of Poland on Sunday.
That is pretty wild. I mean,
it is wild.
I mean, this is an election for the books, I would say. And the fact that one of these candidates, the guy who was a former pimp, is in the running. I mean, he's in neck and neck with the other candidates. So, of course, this is a runoff election. This is a second round of Poland's presidential election that we're talking about here. And that's going to be happening on Sunday, right? The election. Yes. Now, as we said, the two main candidates, Rafal Trzaskowski and Karol Nawrocki. But Nawrocki, he's a character. This is not your typical presidential candidate. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, the problem with Poland these days is that it's divided, politically, it's divided in half. And half of Poland supports liberals in general, and half of Poland supports conservatives. So people will support whatever side they're on. There's a saying in Polish that if either side puts a horse to run for president, people will support it anyway. Because they don't actually care who's running for president. They care about the people behind them and the ideology behind them. So Nawrocki is conservative, Trzaskowski is a liberal, and that's all that counts.
Right. And I want to dive a little bit more into both of these candidates. But I'm so fascinated with all of these colorful details that you're giving me about Nawrocki. Here in America, as you know, we have our own pretty colorful character in Donald Trump. He has a pretty checkered past. And here he is as president for the second term. Tell me a little bit more about Nawrocki.
Well, I can tell you that Donald Trump openly supports Nawrocki for president. He met him in the White House just about, I think, 3 weeks ago. They took a photo together in the Oval Office, and they used it in the campaign in Poland. And then 2 days ago, there was as I'm sure you know, CPAC meeting in Poland. He was openly supported by the U.S. Secretary for Homeland Security, and a lot of people gathered there, had caps on, red caps saying "Make Poland Great Again." So you can imagine, there's among Nawrocki's fans, there's a strong support for Donald Trump.
And right, I mean, I've even seen images of some of these rallies of people in the street waving American flags, and they have their like MAGA hats on, etc.
Nawrocki was born in Gdańsk, and he lived in Gdańsk, in northern Poland. He's basically very, very nationalistic, and he keeps saying that the Catholic faith is important to him. He wants to shut down borders. He's very, very anti-immigration.
We are ready for victory on June 1st. It is within our reach. We must give our all in the final days of the campaign and not be deceived by the virtuosos of lies who want to give away our homeland.
If you see the connection to Donald Trump, yes, this is basically very similar program. Anti-immigration, pro-nationalistic, and anti-European.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's his platform.
Yes.
And he's got this, as you say, very interesting bio, which has not hurt him politically, obviously, because
no, he didn't. No.
Half of the population is supporting this guy.
Yes.
But let's talk about now the candidate on the other side, who seems to be almost like a polar opposite.
I'm the mayor of Warsaw. I have participated in 5 elections. You all know me. You all know my views.
So this is Trzaskowski. He's a very different personality, big proponent of a unified EU. He speaks multiple foreign languages, and which has earned him the name of Mr. Bonjour.
Yeah, that's what the opposition calls him. Mr. Bonjour.
Okay. So they're kind of making fun of him with that. How is he perceived in Poland?
He's a very well-known figure in public life in Poland because he's been involved in politics for a very long time. He was a deputy foreign minister many years ago. He was a deputy for the European Parliament. He's been a mayor of Warsaw for a long time now. His father was a very famous jazz musician in Poland. So he's kind of an artist. Music is important to him. Books are important to him. And his nickname, Mr Bonjour, comes from the fact that he speaks French. And people who don't like him see this as a negative thing about him. He's not Polish enough because when you're Polish, you're not supposed to speak foreign languages. So that's why they call him Mr Bonjour, because they think that he's this elitist person.
Yes.
And this is the half of Poland that doesn't want to vote for him.
More with Bartosz after the break. So you have really painted the picture of two polar opposites here. I mean, these candidates really couldn't be more different. And as you say, this reflects a very divided Poland if you have these two people neck and neck.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, this election is happening as the global political right is gathering in Poland this week for meetings run by CPAC. And as you know very well, because you covered Washington, D.C., that's the American organization, the Conservative Political Action Conference. Why are they in Poland?
Because they're building this kind of coalition, conservative coalition, anti-European, pro-Trump. I wouldn't call it pro-American. I would call it pro-Trump coalition in Central and Eastern Europe. And this is Poland, Hungary. As you know, CPAC that gathered in Poland moved to Hungary now. And there's going to be a second CPAC meeting in Budapest in Hungary. So they're building this coalition between Polish conservatives, Slovakian conservatives, and Hungarian conservatives. And they were pushing very hard, and Mr. Trump himself and people around him were pushing very hard for the conservative candidate in the latest Romanian presidential elections as well. And they hoped he would win. He lost in the second round, but they hoped he would join the coalition as well. So CPAC is a mechanism to build the coalition.
Gotcha. And I know that Kristi Noem, who is Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security, was in Poland at the CPAC conference, and she was not subtle about her support for Nawrocki.
We need you to elect the right leader. You will be the leaders that will turn Europe back to conservative values. By who you elect as the leader of this country, you will open the eyes.
You know, this is a little bit confusing for us because at the very day when she was in Poland, openly supporting Mr. Nawrocki, the Polish defense minister, who comes from the party of Mr. Trzaskowski, he was in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, and the U.S. Secretary of Defense went to the press conference with him, and he said that Poland is this perfect ally of the US. At the same time, the Secretary of the Homeland Security is in Poland, and she says, no, this government sucks. We need another government in Poland, and Mr. Nawrocki will run the government, and we want him to win the presidency. So it's a little bit, you understand why it's a little bit, confusing to us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's two opposing messages here.
Yeah, because they're completely opposing messages. And it never happened before. The U.S. administration never in the history of Poland was so open about supporting one side of the election in Poland.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, she even referred to Trzaskowski as a train wreck of a leader.
I have watched over the years as socialists and people that are just like this mayor out of Warsaw, that is an absolute train wreck of a leader, have destroyed our countries because they have led by fear.
So, as you mentioned, Bartosz, the CPAC is also holding a gathering in Hungary.
Yes.
And so it seems like there's this kind of broader pattern to what CPAC and American conservatives are trying to do in Europe. They're trying to export like a particular brand of politics.
They're trying to export MAGA to Europe. That's what they're trying to do. The problem is that I don't think that leaders of MAGA understand that there are conservatives in Europe and there are conservatives in Europe. For example, when you look at the stand towards Russia, Mr. Nawrocki is definitely anti-Russian.
Mm-hmm.
He will never support Russia. And this is whoever becomes the Polish president, Poland will stay as a strong ally to Ukraine and with a strong anti-Russian stance. So nobody from Poland went to the CPAC in Budapest because of Russian position. So Mr. Orban, who's the prime minister of Hungary, in terms of ideology, he might be close to the Polish conservatives, but they will never work together with Polish conservatives because of the difference on Russia.
I mean, it's fascinating to me that they're trying to export, the American conservatives are trying to export this brand of MAGA politics, and in a place like Hungary, that's working with like Viktor Orban.
Yes.
But as you're telling me and you're explaining to me that in Poland, this is not going to work, because as different as these two candidates may be, they're united on one thing, and
Absolutely.
that would be their opposition to
Russia.
To Russia.
Yes.
Right. But, talk to me then about how Russia and the war in Ukraine is playing into this election.
It's playing in both of the candidates, except for this one guy in the first round who was openly admiring Putin. But he was, nobody knew him before elections, and he will be forgotten, next week. He was like a joke in the campaign. When it comes to opposition to the Russian aggression, both candidates have exactly the same position, exactly the same. The difference is the conservatives, they worry a little bit about Ukrainians staying in Poland because we have over 1 million Ukrainians staying in Poland, and they play a little bit of anti-Ukrainian card in a sense that they say, well, Ukrainians are taking jobs in Poland. They should move back to Ukraine. They should defend their country. Ukrainian children are taking places in schools from Polish children. The liberals are saying, we like Ukrainians in Poland. They're taking jobs that Poles don't want to take. It's basically the same kind of discussion you're having in the US.
Finally, Bartosz, I want to talk about what the result of this election will mean for Poland. Mm-hmm. As you've said, and as we've been talking about, it's been framed largely as kind of this pro-Trump Polish MAGA candidate that's up against a pro-European one. Do you agree with that framing? I mean, how high are the stakes for Poland?
I agree with this framing. And I think this is, it just so happens that every election in Poland, if it's presidential election or parliamentary elections, every election is the end of the day's election. This is like the most election in our life. And every next election is even more important than the previous one. This is about the direction that the country will go into. Are we going to be a liberal democracy, or are we going to be kind of 90% democracy that is almost democratic and almost European kind of democracy? This is what we see in Hungary, and basically if Mr. Nawrocki becomes the president on Sunday, that probably means that in the next parliamentary elections his party will take over power as well, because this will mean that there's a movement towards right in Poland, and that would mean that majority of voters in Poland are pro-right. And if his party takes over in the next parliamentary elections, that means that Poland is going extremely to the right. Mm. That's what it's all about, basically.
That's what it'll mean.
Yeah.
And a rollback of certain civil rights, protections for people.
It depends on who you ask. Some people, this is like listening to Elon Musk talking about European politics. Mm. The far right taking over for him means that there will be more freedom, and there will be true freedom of speech. You ask liberals, they'll tell you, of course, there will be less freedom of speech, and it's gonna be illiberal. So it depends on who you ask. We're living in times when there's no one truth. Everybody has their own truth, and even the word freedom means something different from different people.
Yes. All the things you're saying sound very, very familiar.
I know. It's and you'll see if the election is really close, and it's going to be close, and if one side of the elections doesn't like the result, We're going to see the same scenes in Warsaw we've seen in Washington on January the 6th.
You mean as in people protesting
Yes,
or questioning
people protesting
the outcomes
violently.
of the election
Yes.
violently? Oh my gosh. Well, Bartosz, we will definitely be watching closely and reading your reporting. Thank you so much for coming on The Take.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And that's The Take. If you're short on time but still want to catch some of our highlights, check out our YouTube Shorts. We post quick clips with the best moments from our episodes that you won't want to miss. It's a great way to stay connected, so check them out, and I'll see you tomorrow.